It all started with a tube of lubricant. Not mine, of course. I found it tucked under the passenger seat of my husband's car, and in that instant, I knew my 32-year marriage was a lie. You see, for 32 years, Richard and I had built an empire from a single KitchenAid mixer and my grandmother's secret recipe for cinnamon rolls. Carol's Comfort Bakes wasn't just a chain of bakeries across Illinois. It was my heart, my soul, poured into flour and sugar. We had the big house in Naperville, the one with the wraparound porch and the perfectly manicured lawn. We had the son, Mark, our pride and joy, the town's fire chief. On the surface, we were the American dream, a picture-perfect family woven into the fabric of our cozy suburban town. But a single slick tube of store-brand lubricant was about to unravel it all. I found it while looking for a fallen earring, my fingers brushing against the cool, cheap plastic. It felt alien in the plush interior of his Lincoln Navigator. We hadn't been intimate in that way for months, a slow, creeping glacier of distance pushing us to opposite sides of our California king bed. At first, I'd blamed it on stress. Running a business, even a successful one, takes its toll. But this was different. This wasn't a sign of stress. This was evidence of an activity, a secret life that didn't include me. Holding it in my hand, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Every late night he'd blamed on a board meeting, every hushed phone call he'd taken in the other room, every time he'd come home smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine. A cloying, sweet lily scent I'd always despised. It all came rushing back, not as isolated incidents, but as a constellation of deceit. The last few months had been a masterclass in subtle rejection. He'd stopped complimenting my baking, the very thing he once claimed made him fall in love with me. He'd scroll through his phone at dinner, a thin, tight smile on his face that never reached his eyes. When I'd try to talk, to bridge the growing chasm between us, he'd wave a dismissive hand. Not now, Carol. I'm swamped. Swamped with what, Richard? I now wondered, the plastic tube feeling heavy as lead in my palm. The denial was a thick fog, but that lubricant was a lighthouse beam, cutting right through it. There was someone else. And the worst part? My gut, that deep, primal instinct a woman has, was screaming that I already knew who it was. I just wasn't ready to face the name. My first concrete clue, beyond the lubricant, came a week later. I was paying the credit card bills online, a task Richard had conveniently passed on to me years ago. Tucked between charges for bakery supplies and property taxes was a name I didn't recognize, the Ocean's Embrace. It was a restaurant in San Diego. The charge was for $475. I froze, my blood turning to ice water. Richard had been on a business trip that week, a convention for financial managers, but he'd told me it was in Denver. He had even complained about the dry mountain air. My fingers trembled as I clicked on the transaction details. Dinner for two. A bottle of 2012 Opus One, the same wine we had opened on our 25th anniversary, a vintage he knew was sacred to me. He had shared our wine, our special occasion, with someone else, in San Diego, while lying about being in Denver. The betrayal was so audacious, so brazen, it took my breath away. It wasn't just cheating. It was a desecration of our shared history. I needed to know. The not knowing was a cancer, eating me alive from the inside. I thought about confronting him, screaming, throwing plates. But what good would that do? He was a practiced liar. He'd just weave another web of deceit around me. No, I needed proof. Cold, hard, undeniable proof that I could hold in my hands. Proof that would stand up in court. That's when I thought of Frank. Frank was a retired police detective who had opened his own private investigation agency. He was discreet, thorough, and had a reputation for being as relentless as a bloodhound. I called him the next morning from a pay-as-you-go burner phone I bought at a 7-Eleven. My voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning in my stomach. I told him my husband's name, gave him his schedule, his license plate number, and a recent photo. "I need to know everything," I said, my voice as cold and hard as a diamond. Everything. Frank started work immediately. The first few days were agonizing. Every ping of my phone made my heart leap into my throat. Finally, an email arrived. The subject line was simple: Update 1. Inside was a single attachment. It was a photograph. Richard, my husband of 32 years, was sitting at an outdoor cafe, his head tilted, smiling that charming smile that had once been reserved only for me. And sitting across from him, her hand resting intimately on his, was our daughter-in-law, Jessica, my son Mark's wife. The bile rose in my throat. It was her. The sweet girl with the bright smile who called me Mom. The one I had welcomed into my family, taught my recipes to, loved like my own daughter. The cloying lily perfume, that was her signature scent. I had even bought her a bottle for her last birthday. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I sank to the floor, the polished hardwood cold against my skin, and I finally let myself break. The sobs were violent, wrenching things, torn from a place of grief so deep I didn't know it existed. They weren't just cheating. They were destroying our son. They were destroying everything. The next email from Frank arrived 2 days later. Update 2. More photos. This time, they were leaving the office of a high-profile divorce attorney, one known for his ruthless tactics. Jessica was holding a thick manila envelope, a triumphant smirk on her face. Richard had his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future built on the ashes of my life and my son's happiness. The third email was the final nail in the coffin. It contained a short video clip, shot from a distance. The location was unmistakable. The balcony of a boutique hotel downtown. Richard and Jessica, silhouetted against the city lights, were locked in a passionate kiss. There was no ambiguity, no room for doubt. It was a portrait of pure, unadulterated betrayal. But Frank wasn't done. His final report was the most damning of all. He had managed to place a listening device in Richard's car. The audio file he sent me was 17 minutes long. For 17 minutes, I sat in my parked car in a secluded corner of a Target parking lot and listened to the two people I should have been able to trust most in the world, gleefully plotting my demise. "The old hag is completely clueless," Jessica's voice, sickeningly sweet, chirped through the speakers. "She still thinks you're the perfect husband." Richard chuckled, a low, guttural sound that made my skin crawl. "Patience, my love. I just need her to sign the new distribution contract. She thinks it's for expanding into Wisconsin. She has no idea she's signing over 51% of the company to a holding corporation I control." "And the house?" Jessica asked, her voice dripping with greed. "The prenup is ironclad, Richard. How do we get her out of the house?" "Don't you worry," he said, his voice smooth as venom. "Once I have the company, I'll drain the accounts. She won't be able to afford the mortgage, let alone a lawyer. We'll have everything. The business, the house, the money, everything." They laughed. They actually laughed. Sitting there, in the sterile silence of my car, a profound and terrifying calm washed over me. The grief was gone, burned away by a white-hot rage. They hadn't just broken my heart. They had declared war, and they had severely, fatally underestimated their opponent. I wasn't an old hag. I was the woman who had built an empire from scratch, and I was about to remind them of that. My plan for revenge wasn't born of a single flash of inspiration. It was meticulously crafted piece by piece in the dead of night while Richard snored beside me, oblivious. It had to be more than just exposing them. It had to be poetic. It had to be humiliating. It had to be a spectacle so devastating that they would never recover from it. It had to be a story they'd tell in Naperville for generations. My first stop was an industrial supply warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago. I walked past aisles of power tools and plumbing supplies until I found what I was looking for, a high-strength, epoxy-based adhesive. The label warned it was for permanent bonding of metal and concrete and could cause severe skin irritation. It was perfect. That evening, while Richard was in the shower, I retrieved the tube of lubricant from his car. In the privacy of my bathroom, I carefully squeezed its contents into the toilet and flushed. Then, wearing thick rubber gloves, I painstakingly filled the empty tube with the industrial-grade superglue. The consistency was almost identical. I wiped the nozzle clean, screwed the cap back on, and placed it exactly where I had found it, tucked under the passenger seat. The bait was set. Step 2 required a trip to a specialty Halloween and theatrical supply store. I bought their most powerful smoke machine, the kind used for haunted houses, along with 2 large bottles of thick fog juice. I also purchased a small, high-definition spy camera, disguised as a smoke detector. That night, after Richard was asleep, I got to work. I installed the fake smoke detector on the ceiling of our master bedroom, positioning it for a perfect panoramic view of the bed. I then secreted the smoke machine in the kitchen pantry, behind a stack of old cookbooks, and ran a thin, clear tube from the machine along the baseboards, under the rug, and up into the air vent that led directly into our bedroom. The whole system was connected to a small remote control I kept on my keychain. The stage was now set. All I needed were the actors. The next morning at breakfast, I put on the performance of a lifetime. I sighed dramatically, rubbing my temples. "Richard, I'm just so stressed out," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I think I need a few days away. My sister in Michigan has been begging me to visit. Maybe some fresh air and time away will do me good." His face lit up, a flicker of relief he tried and failed to hide. "Of course, honey," he said, laying a hand over mine. The touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin. "You deserve a break. Take as long as you need." He thought he was getting rid of me for the weekend. He had no idea I was giving him just enough rope to hang himself. I packed a small overnight bag, kissed him goodbye, the Judas kiss, and told him I'd call him when I got to my sister's. Instead of driving north to Michigan, however, I drove 5 blocks away to a small cafe with a clear view of my house. I ordered a black coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into the live feed from the spy camera. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after I left, Jessica's white SUV pulled into our driveway. She practically skipped to the front door, where Richard was waiting to greet her with a kiss that was far from chaste. My stomach churned, but my hand was steady on the mouse. They moved through the house, my house, laughing and touching, their hands all over each other. They poured themselves glasses of my best champagne and took them upstairs, to my bedroom, to my bed. The camera feed was crystal clear. I watched as they undressed each other, their movements eager and sordid. They were clumsy, grotesque parodies of lovers. I let them get comfortable. I waited until they were fully engaged, lost in their own filth and betrayal. Then I reached into my purse and pressed the small button on the remote control. In the pantry of my house, the smoke machine whirred to life. Thick, white, odorless smoke began to pour through the vent in the bedroom. On my laptop screen, I saw the first wisps curl around the bedposts. At first, they didn't notice. Then Jessica coughed. Richard looked up, his eyes widening in confusion as the room rapidly filled with a dense fog. "What the hell is that?" he sputtered. Panic began to set in. They scrambled for their clothes, but it was too late. The room was now a whiteout. This was my cue. I picked up my burner phone and dialed 911. "Help!" I screamed into the phone, pitching my voice into a state of pure panic. "My house is on fire. 12 Oak Street. I think my husband is trapped inside." I made sure to repeat the address clearly. I knew the dispatch protocol. A fire at a large residential home with a report of entrapment would trigger a full-scale response, and I knew exactly who would be leading the charge. I watched from the cafe as the first sirens echoed in the distance, growing closer and closer. The first vehicle to arrive was the big one, the battalion chief's truck, and stepping out of the driver's seat, pulling on his helmet, was my son, Mark. My heart ached for him, for what he was about to see. But this was a necessary cruelty. The truth, in all its ugly glory, had to be revealed. Firefighters swarmed the house. I saw them break down my front door with a battering ram. A team charged up the stairs. A few moments later, the bedroom window was smashed open from the inside to vent the smoke. And then the parade began. Richard and Jessica, now hopelessly and permanently glued together in a grotesque parody of an embrace, were carried out on a stretcher. They were naked, covered in a fire-retardant blanket that did little to hide their predicament. Neighbors poured out of their houses, phones held high, recording the entire spectacle. I saw the flash of cameras, the looks of shock and disbelief, and I saw my son's face. He stood frozen on the lawn, his helmet off, staring at the two people on the stretcher, his father, his wife. The look on his face was one of such profound devastation, of pure, soul-crushing agony, that it almost broke my resolve. Almost. A video of the entire incident, dubbed the Naperville Night Gluer, was viral before the ambulance even reached the hospital. The emergency room was a circus. Doctors and nurses struggled to figure out how to separate them, their efforts only causing Richard and Jessica more pain as the industrial adhesive held fast. It took a team of surgeons several excruciating hours with a specialized solvent to finally pry them apart, leaving them both with raw, red, and chemically burned skin. The next morning, as they lay in separate rooms, slathered in a soothing medical ointment, I made my final move. I charmed a young nurse's aide, slipping her $200 to swap their prescribed burn cream with 2 large jars of extra hot horseradish mustard I'd brought from home. Their screams of agony were reportedly heard all the way down the hall. That's when I made my entrance. I walked into Richard's room first. He looked pathetic, a shriveled, bandaged man-child, whining in a hospital bed. I didn't say a word. I simply placed a thick folder on his bedside table. Inside were the divorce papers, already filed, along with glossy 8x10 prints of every photo Frank had taken and a transcript of their recorded conversation. His face went pale. Next, I went to Jessica's room. Mark was already there, his face a stone mask. He had already given her his own set of divorce papers. I just smiled, a thin, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes, and placed a restraining order on her lap. "Stay away from my son," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "and stay away from my business." The divorce was swift and brutal for them, faced with irrefutable evidence of adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud. Richard didn't stand a chance. The prenup held. I kept the house, the savings, and 100% of my company, Carol's Comfort Bakes. Richard was left with his car and a mountain of legal debt. Jessica was exiled from town, a social pariah. Mark, my strong, beautiful son, was devastated, but he was a survivor. He moved back home with me, and together we healed. He threw himself into helping me run the business, his sharp mind a perfect complement to my creative spirit. We expanded into 3 new states that year. The betrayal nearly destroyed me, but it didn't. It forged me into something stronger, something unbreakable. It taught me that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't a dish best served cold. Sometimes it's a spectacle best served hot, with a side of industrial-grade superglue and the whole town watching. It's a crazy story, isn't it? Life is full of them. Betrayal, revenge, and justice, all wrapped up in one messy, complicated package. If you want to hear more tales about people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our little community here at Auntie Carol Tells Stories. You never know what kind of story I'll be baking up next.